It was the summer of 1973 in the county borough of Neath Port Talbot in the southwest of Wales in the United Kingdom. The season brought long, warm days with a cool breeze, clear skies, blooming flowers, and the lush landscapes promising glorious days to come. These glorious summer days, once filled with cheer and vibrance, were suddenly darkened by sinister and heartbreaking news which sent ripples of fear through the community. Britton Ferry is a town located on the banks of the River Neath where it meets Swansea Bay. Historically an important port town, Britton Ferry played a significant role in the industrial development of South Wales during the 19th century, particularly in the coal and steel industries. It was Saturday the 14th of July 1973, and 16-year-old Sandra Newton, accompanied by her boyfriend, spent the night out on the town. The pair departed a nightclub and went their separate ways at approximately 1 a.m. on the 15th of July. Sandra planned to walk the 5-mile distance to her residence, however she never returned home. She was, however, known to hitchhike, and it was thought that she likely hitched a ride. However, for reasons unknown, she failed to reach her destination. Loved ones were concerned that Sandra was nowhere to be seen, and police were alerted to her disappearance. Police believed that Sandra had been abducted while hitchhiking. Sandra's uncharacteristic disappearance instilled deep fear and anxiety among her loved ones and the close-knit community, casting a shadow over their peaceful summer days. Reports conflict on whether it was 2 or 3 days after her vanishing. However, the body of a female was found at the entrance of a culvert in a ditch near an abandoned coal mine in Tonmore, 4 miles east of the market town of Neath. It was clear to investigators upon the discovery of the body by the colliery that no effort had been made to conceal the body, and because of the specific location where the body was found, police were of the opinion that the perpetrator had extensive local knowledge, specifically in the rural areas. The autopsy report confirmed the identity of the body as being that of Sandra Newton, and the coroner concluded that the 16-year-old had been hit over the head, sexually assaulted, and had been asphyxiated by her skirt. The hunt for Sandra's killer began, however, weeks went by with no leads. Then, in September of 1973, the community were rocked once again by a double murder. On Saturday the 15th of September, 16-year-old best friends Pauline Floyd and Geraldine Hughes concluded the night of partying at a nightclub in Swansea, a vibrant coastal town in South Wales. The girls agreed to hitchhike back home. However, news quickly spread around the local area that they didn't make it back. In the early hours of Sunday the 16th, their bodies were found dumped in woodland in Llandarcy, a village not far from Neath. Geraldine and Pauline had both been sexually assaulted and strangled to death, eerily similar to the death of Sandra Newton 3 months prior. Despite the similarities, the two cases were not linked at the time. With fears of a serial killer on the loose, the South Wales Police ramped up their investigation into the deaths of Pauline and Geraldine. 150 detectives were assigned to the case, which would be notoriously known as the case of the Saturday Night Strangler. Police received thousands of leads and tips, which proved difficult for the force to keep up with. They were overwhelmed by the fact that over 10,000 drivers needed to be questioned, and furthermore, over 13,000 employees at Port Talbot Steelworks were all considered suspects. The M4 road was also under construction, with hundreds of people working on it, and the annual Neath Fair brought thousands of visitors to the community, which meant that they also needed to be questioned. It is worth noting that in 1973, the United Kingdom was struggling in an energy crisis, and the working week had been reduced to just 3 days, making police's job even more difficult. It was established that Geraldine and Pauline had been witnessed getting into a vehicle, specifically a white Austin 1100, on the night they vanished. The suspect driver was described as having, quote, bushy hair, a moustache, and a man between 30 and 35 years of age. In the summer of 1974, the trail went cold and the case was put into storage, where unfortunately many notes were lost due to mould and a mice infestation. Dr. Colin Dark, who was employed at Forensic Science Services in Chepstow, anticipated that such events would happen and promptly requested for the girls' underwear to be stored at the facility in Chepstow until a time where DNA technology had advanced enough. This decision ultimately proved to be the doorway to breaks in the case, when in 1998 the genetic fingerprint of the killer was taken from remaining semen evidence. For the first time, scientists could separate the victim's DNA from the killer's. In 2000, another breakthrough came when the National DNA Database was made available to investigators, where they hoped to match the sample with someone listed. There were approximately 1.7 million DNA samples on record since its inception in 1995, and despite not finding a match then, the Llandarcy case was officially reopened and named Operation Magnum. Delving into the remaining archive of case files, there were over 35,000 persons of interest, including family, friends, and boyfriends of the victims. However, detectives had only managed to retrieve approximately 500 DNA swab samples. A team of Detective Chief Inspector Paul Bethel, Phil Rees and Geraint Bale, along with a psychological profiler, trawled through each name and cut the persons of interest list down to 500 names after 8 months of dedicated hard work. Passport, driving licence and criminal record checks were conducted, resulting in 353 men cooperating with authorities and being tested. However, none were a match. Bethel, Rees and Bale then dedicated themselves to investigating the remaining 147 names. The trio looked at other cold cases, where they found striking similarities between the Llandarcy murders and the murder of Sandra Newton. DNA from evidence from Sandra Newton's case then confirmed that the person who killed Sandra also took the lives of Geraldine and Pauline. Next on their list was suspect number 200. He was Joseph Joe William Capin, a nightclub bouncer based in Port Talbot. Capin had been questioned previously, and what came to investigators' attention at that time was that Capin had owned an Austin 1100, the exact same vehicle Geraldine and Pauline were last seen going into. However, Capin had insisted, as the car was without wheels, was not roadworthy. He was known to be a violent man with a short temper and had engaged in petty crime throughout his life. He also had a record of domestic violence and was imprisoned several times. Capin's car was recorded on the road by police conducting stop-and-check operations. This evidence would have disproved his alibi, but due to the lack of a computerised system for cross-referencing, it went unnoticed by detectives. Capin also claimed to have been at the Neath Fair on the night of the murders. As a result, Capin was not further pursued as a suspect at that time. Dr. Colin Dark of Forensic Science Services in Chepstow decided to look into potential familial DNA matches, which provided police with a staggering breakthrough. South Wales Police decided to use an innovative tactic of searching for the DNA of potential living descendants of the murderer, as their genetic profiles would closely resemble the killer's. Since 50% of an individual's DNA is inherited from each parent, investigators believed they could identify the killer by finding a partial match with the DNA of their children. They examined the profiles of local individuals that partially matched the killer's DNA and compiled a list of potential suspects. Among these was local car thief Paul Capin, whose DNA was already in police records but who was only 7 years old at the time of the murders. Paul's DNA showed a distinctive similarity to the killer's, leading police to identify his father, Joe Capin, who had been a suspect in the original investigation, as the prime suspect. Upon arriving at Capin's address in 2001, they were greeted by his ex-wife, Christine Powell, who told investigators news which they had not hoped to hear. She divorced Capin in 1980, and Joe Capin had died in 1990, aged 49, from lung cancer. Christine also admitted she lied about his alibi when they first questioned her, which was something she often did when police visited their address. According to BBC News, Joe Capin's son, Paul, and daughters, Deborah and Beverly, always maintained the belief that he was innocent. An application to exhume Joe Capin's body for testing was granted. According to reports, witnesses reported that as the exhumation began in May 2002, a thunderstorm suddenly swept over and a loud thunderclap echoed as the ground was first disturbed, leading them to believe they had, quote, unearthed evil. DNA samples were retrieved from a femur and a tooth and was found to be a perfect match to the killer of Geraldine, Pauline and Sandra. Dr. Colin Dark told Wales Online, quote, after all those years of questions, suppositions and heartache for the girls' families, we'd got our man at last. Christine Powell, Joe Capin's ex-wife, stated, quote, our first thoughts are with the families of the victims. Our concerns are protection from hurt for our children. We are all deeply shocked by the revelations. It is suspected that Joe Capin may have committed a fourth murder in February 1976. 23-year-old Maureen Mulcahy was strangled following a Saturday night out, and her body was found on an estate within close proximity of Joe Capin's home. There was, unfortunately, no DNA evidence to compare. However, Dr. Colin Dark believes that DNA could potentially be retrieved from evidence within the case archives and be tested against Capin's DNA with modern technology. Capin is also believed to have committed several unsolved sexual assaults. Pauline Floyd's father, Trevor, was consumed by sorrow, yet according to neighbour and local councillor Margaret Jones, it was the day he had long awaited. Denver Hughes, the father of Geraldine, stated, quote, when we heard the news, we couldn't believe it at first. We were so shocked. My wife Jean and I broke down and cried. Then we took a few flowers to Geraldine's grave and had a few quiet words with her. We felt we had put her to rest properly at long last, but we cannot thank the police enough because they have never given up the hunt for the killer. The investigation marked the world's inaugural use of familial DNA tracing to posthumously uncover a serial killer and resolve a previously unsolved murder through familial DNA analysis. Additionally, Capin is recognised as the first documented serial killer in Welsh history. Geraldine Hughes' cousin, Julie Begley, told the BBC, quote, no words can describe the way we all felt. It was a huge relief. None of us ever stopped hoping that one day we would find out who he was. Although you get on with your life, it never goes away. Geraldine was a fantastic girl. She was always full of fun. Sandra Newton's friend, Theresa May, stated, quote, I've been going down to her grave for 49 years, and it's hard to believe she's there. My beautiful friend. She had her life taken away from her future taken away from her. I still think about her now. All these things that we could have and should have done together. But after all of those years, she can finally rest in peace now.